This is the story of Studio 54. Every night, the most famous people in the land showed up to join in this unbridled insanity.
Get pissed drunk if you want to.
And there'd be a lot of some spectacles.
Out here because there's a party.
As the world tried to penetrate their infamous velvet rope, Steve and Ian became drunk with power.
Steve certainly went totally crazy.
Then one day, the boys went too far, and the fun stopped. But Steve and Ian had shrewd and powerful allies.
Well, sure, they're making a lot of money and they're reporting a lot of taxes.
But in the end, no one could save them, and Steve and Ian went to jail.
They each received 3.5 years.
That chilly April night in 1977, Studio 54 became a strange bit of American history. It had touched a powerful nerve.
We're talking about a single pop culture phenomenon that dominated its particular time.
And never before had the most famous people in the world flocked to where they would so publicly mingle with the anonymous.
It's a highly amusing place. I come here about once a week.
Which brings us to yet another of Studio 54's excesses, not often seen in quite the same way these days. The celebrities.
Out here because there's a party at Studio 54.
Liza Minnelli was hanging out with like Baryshnikov and giggling.
Michael Jackson when he was less agoraphobic.
And Halston was there, you know, screaming.
You know, Cher.
Or even Betty Ford would come in.
The biggest celebrities in the world.
At one point in time, Steve Rubell was interviewed by, I think it was New York Magazine, and he made a statement that we make so much money, only the mafia makes more, but I better not talk because the IRS might hear it.
When our big boss, the boss of all New York, saw that, he underlined it and sent it down to the Criminal Investigation Division and said, you know, what are you guys doing about that? So actually, that article was a red flag.
At 9:30 on the morning of December 14th, 1978, the unconquerable Studio 54 was raided. Shortly thereafter, Ian Schrager showed up as he always did. He was carrying his mail and some papers.
He said, I'm one of the owners of the club. He said, can I go upstairs? As he was going upstairs, one of the agents said he forgot his mail, and he picked it up. He found an envelope that contained cocaine. We called down the U.S. Attorney's Office, got permission from Mr. Sutter, we got a warrant, and we arrested him.
For 1977, Studio 54 had paid only $8,000 in taxes. As the investigation continued, $100,000 in cash was found in the trunk of Steve's car, and $900,000 in cash was found in a safety deposit box at Citibank. Steve and Ian had been caught, undeniably.
Steve and Ian, desperate to get off the hook, tried to rat on someone more powerful than themselves, a member of the Carter administration. Prosecutor, Peter Sudler.
Eyewitness testimony that the then White House Chief of Staff, Hamilton Jordan, had been to Studio 54 and had been seen using cocaine.
A special prosecutor was assigned to investigate the allegations. He found no evidence of wrongdoing. No charges were brought against Jordan.
But on February 28, 1980, 1 month after Steve and Ian went away, Studio 54's liquor license expired. It would not be renewed in the name of 2 convicted felons, so Studio 54 closed for 15 months.
A potential new owner, Mark Fleischman, was waiting in the wings.
That's when we went into negotiations in earnest, and Roy arranged for me to go to federal prison to meet with them.
In September of 1980, Rubell and Schrager were transferred to Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama. The heart of Dixie was an odd place for 2 Jewish boys from New York.
It looked like a country club. It was an old Air Force base. It was a lot of grass. Alabama. It was hot, sticky. I spent the day there with them, and we brought them food. They hated the food, so... and their mates were, their prison mates were all kinds of, most of them Southern, corrupt politicians who had been caught with their hands in the cookie jar.
Studio's clientele was fickle, and Steve and Ian knew it. They were determined to keep the place alive, and even behind bars, they needed to do something fast. For the first time, they were vulnerable and needed help. They needed a buyer with a clean slate.
They wanted me to meet the person that was going to be the new owner, Mark Fleischman. And so there was no other place to meet except in jail.
Mark Fleischman was a respectable hotel owner who had been granted liquor licenses in New York State before.
After an 18-month legal battle with the state liquor authority, Studio 54 was finally given the green light. Armed with a new liquor license, Fleischman was ready to reopen the club.
By that time, people's habits had changed, other places had opened, people were saying disco is dead, it'll never work, why'd you back out, et cetera, et cetera. And I didn't, I just took a shot at it.
Casting the new Studio 54 allowed for a certain changing of the guard. With a new cast in place, Mark Fleischman was ready to reintroduce the club back into New York City nightlife. On September 15th, 1981, Fleischman threw an opening night celebration that rivaled the days of the old studio.
That opening night party was as insane as any event that I'd ever been at Studio 54.
Even some of the most celebrated guests of studios past had problems at the door. In order to rejuvenate the club, Fleischman threw a series of parties for the next 30 days straight.
Just something that would create excitement because it needed that day after day after day so that it was perceived to be hot.
As Fleischman slowly added his own touches, he made a significant and controversial change to the club. He brought in party promoters.
You need 3,000 people to be full overnight, or 4,000 sometimes. So, you know, to get 4,000 people to come out every night of the week, I organized different kinds of promoters.
Each promoter was responsible for bringing in a certain crowd on specified nights.
There was a night for everything. There was a preppy night, there was a gay night, there was a media night, there was a bachelor's night.
Party promoter Nikki Haskell remembers one event that she hosted at Studio 54.
And I gave a party with Alan Carr for the premiere of Where the Boys Are. And we took the whole entranceway of Studio 54 and put a gangplank down the front of it and put tons of sand mixed with gold, with bathing beauties and bodybuilders and boats upside down.
In 1983, preppies, yuppies, and a new form of socializing emerged at Studio 54. One promoter, Jerry Rubin, started throwing 5 p.m. networking parties.
It was a way to go to Studio 54 where you could actually see people and you could actually speak to people.
As the old studio crowd contended with the changes to the club, they also watched a transformation in New York City nightlife. The era of sexual freedom was coming to an end.
AIDS changed everything.
In '83, people started becoming aware of it. In '84, it became a full-scale epidemic.
In 1985, Studio 54's second owner, Mark Fleischman, decided he had had enough.
I just started to burn out. I became tired, and I also saw the writing on the wall, and I saw it was just time to sell. 4 years of owning Studio 54 was a long time. Steve and Ian only had it for 2.5, and they burned out.
Like a monument looking for its lost time, the building at 254 West 54th Street passed obscurely between a few more owners and closed for good as a seedy strip joint. Mark Fleischman went on to open numerous nightclubs in New York and Los Angeles.
New York at 11.
Have you been to Tattoos yet?
Tattoo? The plane!
No. This is the Oh So Hot Manhattan nightclub.
Okay. Sorry.
Catherine Kinley is there right now, live.
It's called Tattoo, and it's owned by the former owner of Studio 54 back in the early 80s, Mark Fleischman. And just what makes Tattoo the hot club du jour, shall we say? Well, maybe it's because it's basically an old-fashioned supper club with great jazz, like you hear behind me from the likes of artists such as Wild Bill Davis. And, well, maybe it's because in 5 minutes, this is what it becomes. Well, I guess you could say variety is the spice of life here at Tattoo, and it has all the prerequisites of a hot club, limos, and people waiting in line outside who may never get in.
This is CNN.
Fleischman bought and reopened the mecca of the disco era, Studio 54, in 1981.
Be entertained, they want to feel good.
And his new place, Tattoo, is packed.
I'll play a little bit. We're just going to try to make this up as we go along. There's been no practice, and we're just sort of winging it. But the deal is these people are supposed to cover for me if I'm really bad. That's what presidents try to get people to do, too. Okay. I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank you for your support.